It's been over a month and a half since the Starliner crew flight test, but the criticisms have never stopped thanks to its string of problems. The NASA astronauts remain unable to return, heightening the community's concern for their safety to levels not seen in years. Because this situation eerily reminds people of the tragic deaths of 3 Soviet cosmonauts in 1971 who perished on their way back to Earth. So, every astronaut prefers Dragon over Starliner for a very good reason. Join us in today's episode as we dive into the details. Starliner undoubtedly looks like a joke right now. Astronauts Butch and Suni arrived at the ISS on June 5th, planning to stay for a week before returning on Starliner, landing in the southwestern United States. And now it's already the end of July. When will they return? No one knows. Before launch, a helium leak was detected. However, Boeing and NASA still decided to green-light Starliner's takeoff, assuring that this wouldn't affect the mission. But Starliner's troubles didn't end there. After reaching space, 5 of the spacecraft's thrusters malfunctioned, delaying the ISS docking by over an hour. And to make matters worse, more helium leaks were discovered, bringing the total to 5. The astronauts had to apply temporary measures to address the issue. After consulting with Boeing and NASA engineers, the crew managed to recover 4 out of 5 thrusters and stop the leaks by closing all helium manifolds in the attitude control thruster systems. Upon docking with the ISS, the whole Starliner's systems underwent a thorough inspection to ensure everything was in order. Starliner representatives assert that the remaining helium is 10 times what needed for the return journey, and the leaks won't hinder the astronauts' return. The main concern now is the reaction control system. NASA and Boeing reported that 5 thrusters were disabled when they became overheated and lost thrust. Although 4 thrusters were later recovered, some couldn't reach full power levels as Starliner approached docking. All right, let me explain the situation. We all know the unexpected shutdown of 5 thrusters forced a manual recovery and delayed the ISS docking by an hour. But the real issue is their performance during the journey back. During re-entry, there's no precious time to troubleshoot or ask ground support what should be done and how to do it. Everything must work flawlessly with minimal manual intervention. If those thrusters act up again, we're looking at a potential disaster. Take a gander at Starliner's control panel. It's a far cry from SpaceX's automated setup. Buttons and manual controls everywhere. In a crisis, that's a recipe for trouble. To tackle this, teams at NASA's White Sands test facility in New Mexico had to roll up their sleeves. They've been putting Starliner's thrusters through their paces on the ground, mimicking the conditions faced en route to the ISS. According to Boeing's website, they're digging deep to uncover the root causes of the RCS issues and those pesky helium leaks. Boeing seems to be feeling the heat from public criticism. Mark Nappy, their vice president and commercial crew program manager, is clearly frustrated. Every morning I sit and I read them, and I tell you, from being a representative of Boeing and a representative of the Starliner program, they're pretty painful to read, he said. We've gotten a really good test flight that's been accomplished so far, and it's being viewed rather negatively. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at what Nappy himself said about their ground simulations. This testing is trying to replicate what the worst-case thruster saw in flight. So far, we've not been able to replicate the temperatures that we saw in flight. So the team is off talking about that, as a matter of fact, right now, so that they can determine whether or not there's a form of testing or something in the test that we want to go change so that we can replicate that situation. Now, this is crucial. Before Starliner went into space, it supposedly underwent a series of simulations to mimic what it would experience during its journey. But even after docking with the ISS, Boeing is struggling to recreate and simulate what actually happened. They're scrambling to understand potential risks for a safe return. So the question is, how did they conduct simulation tests before the flight? Did they really do that? NASA, in its statement, claims that astronauts could return in Starliner in an emergency. However, they're not allowing it under normal conditions. This implies a level of uncertainty from NASA themselves. On one hand, Butch and Suni appear very confident about Starliner's ability to bring them back safely. Wilmore stated, "We're absolutely confident." He also mentioned that they tested a safe haven procedure, sheltering inside Starliner in case they needed to suddenly undock from the ISS, and the test went well. However, Wilmore himself revealed a noteworthy detail. He could feel the spacecraft's performance degrading as the thrusters temporarily malfunctioned. He said, "You could tell it was degraded, but still, it was impressive." NASA asserts that the astronauts are not stuck on the ISS. True, this isn't a lie, but as you pointed out, it's only half the truth. All parties are putting on an optimistic front, yet their very words prove otherwise. This paints a complex picture. The astronauts appear confident, perhaps partly to reassure the public and maintain a positive spirit. However, they also acknowledge some concerning technical issues. NASA and Boeing strive to maintain an optimistic message, but they can't completely hide safety concerns. The discrepancy between their words and the technical reality suggests the situation might be more serious than publicly disclosed. While Starliner struggles to save face, SpaceX Dragon is preparing to shine brightly with the Polaris Dawn mission, the first mission in the Polaris program, an ambitious private initiative operated by SpaceX on behalf of Jared Isaacman. This groundbreaking mission will feature a crew of 4 members, led by billionaire Jared Isaacman himself. The most remarkable highlight of this mission is that they will perform a spacewalk, stepping outside into the vacuum of space for the first time. When Polaris Dawn launches, the crew will enter a high elliptical orbit, reaching a maximum height of 2,200 kilometers and a minimum height of about 190 kilometers. After a few orbits, the Dragon spacecraft will raise its apogee to 1,400 kilometers, higher than any human has flown since the last Apollo mission in 1972. This is where the Polaris Dawn crew will conduct most of their research. After completing the majority of their research in the high elliptical orbit, the Polaris Dawn crew members will lower the apogee to around 700 kilometers, where they will perform the extravehicular activity, EVA. All 4 Polaris Dawn crew members will be exposed to the vacuum of space. This EVA will not only be the first conducted by any private citizens, but also the largest EVA ever in terms of the number of participants. You know what? Typically on the International Space Station, ISS, and some other space stations and spacecraft, leaving the vehicle involves sealing those participating in the EVA in an airlock, isolating them from the rest of the spacecraft, and then gradually reducing the pressure to vacuum levels. But with this mission, things are different. Unlike anything seen before in the history of space exploration, Dragon spacecraft does not have an airlock, meaning the entire cabin of Dragon will be exposed to the vacuum of space. And to prevent the vacuum from damaging the inside of the spacecraft, SpaceX technicians have removed any components or materials that cannot withstand prolonged exposure to vacuum, and added footholds and handholds in the cabin for stability, including a ladder at the front hatch of Dragon, called Skywalker. During 2-hour spacewalk, the astronauts will be protected in SpaceX's EVA suits, tethered to the spacecraft. Wow, Polaris Dawn will not just be a demonstration mission. It is a valuable opportunity for SpaceX to test the suits, train astronauts for future spacewalks, and gather essential information. Isaac Jaredman, in his latest announcement on X, said, "This may have been our last week for Polaris Dawn training. We reviewed research experiments, flew refresher launch dock entry, EVA sims, completed cold testing and suit repair contingencies. We thanked everyone we could find, placed our mission patch on the simulator and signed it. It is always possible we could be back, but for now, we are ready. So, we are so close, and you should know that he is the one who pays, and SpaceX takes care of everything else. This mission will represent an unprecedented vertical integration, combining the most advanced and reliable technologies from a highly trusted company. Trust me, you'll be safer on this mission than going to space in a Boeing spacecraft on a ULA rocket and overseen by NASA. Well, not to mention Polaris Dawn, SpaceX's Demo 2 mission 4 years ago is enough to beat Starliner CFT-1. Although both were first crewed test flights, the experiences they delivered were worlds apart. Remember the moment Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the 2 astronauts sent to the ISS on Demo 2, exuded absolute excitement and confidence. This was in stark contrast to Wilmore's dejected head-in-hands expression when Starliner encountered issues right at liftoff. SpaceX Dragon, we're go for launch. Let's light this candle, Hurley said to SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. Can you feel the excitement in his voice? This was the first time since NASA retired the space shuttles in 2011 that the agency could launch astronauts from home soil instead of paying for seats on Russian spacecraft. A moment of pride for America. And when the astronauts returned, they didn't hesitate to praise the Dragon capsule. Listen to Hurley's words. "I personally expected there to be more. Certainly not issues with the vehicle, but some challenges or some things that were maybe not quite what we expected. But the mission went just like the simulators. Honestly, from start to finish, all the way, there were no surprises." Behnken painted a vivid picture of the re-entry as the capsule descended into the atmosphere. "Once we descended a little bit into the atmosphere, Dragon really came alive. You see, all are NASA astronauts, all riding on a vehicle in the first manned mission. But their reactions are vastly different. It doesn't take much effort to see which vehicle is trusted and preferred more. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time."